Her life has taken multiple turns, from a life-threatening liver disease to an organ transplant to falling in love with her organ donor. Her story was made into one of the most viewed episodes on the Hallmark channel, but there's no happy ending. She's here to tell her story. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is brought to you in part by Colonial Metals Group. Protect your family's financial future with gold and silver. Their level of professionalism makes it easy for you to learn everything you need to know about preserving all you've worked for. Call Paul and his staff at Colonial Metals Group to learn how to get started. Call 800-898-1841. 800-898-1841. That's 800-898-1841, or go online to colonialmetalsgroup.com/LET radio. Joining us from the Chicago area, we have Heather Kruger on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Heather, actually, I met at Creative Con, which was an event in Chicago. In February, there'll be a Creative Con number 2. I believe it's going to be very close to Miracle Mile at Intercontinental Hotel. And she is a niece of Brian Swift, who I had on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show back in February 2022. An amazing story. First of all, Heather, thanks for agreeing to tell your story on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Very much appreciated.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
One of the things that Heather is deceiving, I'm going to say this right now. When you meet her in person, you think, oh, yeah. She's like, hey, how about I come on your show and tell us my story? I'm like, yeah, let's make it happen. Okay, it's kind of shining around. And then she tells me the details like, oh, my God, you kidding me? We got to have you on here.
I appreciate that.
You've gone from, look, your story has more twists and turns than a goat trail. It is insanity.
Yes, it's hard. It's very surreal and hard to believe that is my story these last few years, all that has transpired.
Right, and before we get into her story, Brian, her uncle, was paralyzed in a freak football accident when he was a teenager. And he's a phenomenal interview. You should check it out. You can get the podcast version at letradio.com. And then your own story, Heather. I got to ask this. How much can one family stand? How much can they go through?
Oh, gosh, I know. And really, my Uncle Brian, after everything he went through, he was a lot of my strength and support after everything I went through, because it's just our family, we have a strong faith and a never give up attitude and suck it up buttercup, and we're going to get through this no matter what. So family and faith definitely has helped us. I can relate to everything you said, because we all look at our stories, and some may not be as extreme as yours, which we'll talk about in a few moments. But we all have my mother used to say this all the time. And in catechism and parochial school, they'd say, we all have our crosses to bear. Well, we all do. Exactly.
You go, oh, my goodness, how much more can I take? And then you hear a story like years ago, oh, look, I got nothing on this girl. Nothing.
Oh, no. Well, and when I was listening to some of the episodes of your show, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm qualified to be on this show.
Isn't that funny?
Just said, like, sometimes you think, oh gosh, how much more can I handle? Like, can I catch a break? But then you hear someone else's story, and it's like it snaps your perspective back into reality really quick and knocks you down a few pegs,
Well, I got to say this, and I'm probably going to butcher it, so I'm going to paraphrase. I talked to Heather a while ago about doing, the interview, and she said, my life went from a Hallmark movie to a Lifetime movie. And I'm thinking, I know Hallmark. Everybody lives happily ever after. Lifetime, I'm not so sure about.
Not so much. Correct. Yes. Well, with my story, at age 24, fairly healthy, no pre-existing conditions. For about a year, I was getting more and more fatigued, more pain on my right upper side of my stomach. Been to the doctor, scans, blood work, everything's fine. Until one day, my coworker told me, "Why are your eyes yellow?" and went to the hospital. They asked if I had any liver issues. No, nothing in the family. Like I said, no pre-existing conditions. So things got worse quickly. And by the time I was diagnosed at the University of Illinois Hospital in Chicago here, they told me I had stage 4 liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, cirrhosis. So that was a complete shock because I was working in the health field. I was a social drinker, but nothing crazy, and going along fine. So that it was just a complete shock for me. Plus, I feel like at that age, I felt like I was invincible.
Right.
And these are things that happen to other people, not yourself. So at that point, they thought, well, you're young, you don't have any other issues. Maybe we could reverse this cirrhosis. 3 months later, I turned completely jaundiced, was hallucinating from the toxins, and went into acute liver failure. At that point, there was no turning back or reversing the damage. Within a week, they put me on the Illinois liver transplant wait list, and they told me I had less than 50% chance of surviving another 2 months. So that was, again, a shocker, and I think you go into fight or flight mode. At least I did.
I was going to ask you, how do you respond to something like that? That's horrible. First of all, I can't imagine having liver disease at 24. I just can't imagine that. And at 24, I was 6 foot tall and bulletproof. I thought nothing bad would happen to me. And by the way, I think this is what killed Mickey Mantle. And he had serious bouts with drinking, but he had a liver transplant, if I do recall.
Okay, yeah, and Walter Payton was another one that he passed away waiting for a liver transplant. Football player.
Yeah.
But yes,
Chicago Bears, famous football player.
Yes.
I had a guy that I worked with in the Baltimore Police Department. I'm not going to give his name right now. He was a sergeant. He was a phenomenal police, really, really good. And he got stuck by a dirty needle. I say a dirty needle that had a heroin user, and he wound up developing hepatitis, and it destroyed his liver. And they were prepping him for a liver transplant, and he died. And he had 2 twin daughters that were, I think, 2 years of age at the time he died. So he was in his early 30s.
Gosh.
This kind of thing is for real. It's not a joke.
Well, yeah, and I did not realize, and I can go into this later on, just how common liver disease has become today. But anyways, to answer your question about how do you respond to getting that type of news, well, I received that news over the phone initially. So that was one. And 2, I actually started laughing because, again, I thought I was invincible. And I was like, you got to be talking to the wrong person. This is not my life. This is not happening. And so I started laughing. And the doctor was like, no, Heather, I am serious. Like, I don't think you're going to make it another 2 months. And you need to come to the ER tomorrow morning. The team is waiting for you.
How old were you?
So that was 2 weeks before my 25th birthday.
And the doctor's telling you over the phone, I don't think you got 2 months left in you.
Yeah.
Look, that's not a phone call anybody wants. Heather, how do people have that kind of phone call?
I don't know. I'm still in shock over that part. Like, what is the protocol with that?
Listen, I had to make really bad death notifications, a lot of other things, which we'll talk about in a few moments, but we always did that kind of stuff in person. We didn't do it over the phone. That was a rule that we had in Baltimore. We're talking with Heather Kruger. Heather is the niece of Brian Swift, who was on the show February of 2022. She was diagnosed with a fatal liver disease, had a transplant, fell in love with her donor. They got married. I'm telling you, this thing has got lots of twists and turns. It is made into one of the most viewed episodes in the history of Hallmark television. We return, we're going to talk about that and much more. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and be sure to click like. Don't go anywhere. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We'll be right back. Colonial Metals Group has helped me create a self-directed IRA where I can have direct access to my assets. Let the team of experts, Paul and his staff at Colonial Meadows Group, help you protect your family's future, giving you great information for free. Their level of professionalism and ability to listen make it easy for you to learn everything you need to know about preserving all you work for. Call Paul and his staff at Colonial Meadows Group, 800-898-1841, 800-898-1841. That's 800-898-1841, or go online to colonialmeadowsgroup.com/LET radio. Remember, let Paul and his staff at Colonial Meadows Group give you more information.
How do you start your day? After grabbing a cup of coffee, I grab my phone and open the Clubhouse social audio app and go right to the Breakfast with Champions rooms. I get what I need to start my day the right way in the Breakfast with Champions rooms on the Clubhouse social audio app. Best of all, the Clubhouse social audio app is free, and so are the Breakfast with Champions rooms. So download the Clubhouse social audio app and join me in the Breakfast with Champions rooms.
Back to our conversation with Heather Kruger on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Heather is a very interesting, very inspiring story. She was diagnosed with a fatal liver disease. She's 24. At 25, they gave her 2 months to live. Before we went to break, she talked about getting the phone call from the doctor, which we're amazed about, saying, you got 2 months left to live. And you started laughing at him, didn't you?
I did. When I look back now, I'm like, wow, I can't believe that was my response. But I feel like God, whether you realize it in the moment or not, God prepares you for things that are going to be thrown at you unexpectedly.
Right.
And that was something I definitely had his strength there, and maybe just that invincible 24-year-old mindset that, okay, you could tell me whatever you want, whatever statistics, but there's no way I'm going anywhere. Like, that was my mindset. That, like I said, I was put on the transplant list, and I never thought, like, I'm going to die. I never thought, oh, I hope I get a transplant. I hope I get a match. It was like, I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And I just had to stick with that mindset throughout, no matter, every time I'd go in for lab work, it just kept getting worse and worse. And, they said your body is, at this point, your body is compensating very well since your liver is functioning on, 10% at this point. So as time went on over that summer, like I said, I was on the wait list, but then they said, we think you should start looking for a living donor because of how crucial your health is right now. And we think the odds of survival will improve if you have a living donor. So my sister made flyers and put on social media, and people were getting tested. First thing they look at is if you're a blood match. And that was about September. By December, I went to Mayo Clinic for a second opinion. They said the same thing as the university, that it was stage 4 liver disease. It was autoimmune hepatitis. So for some reason, my body attacked the liver and destroyed it pretty much. And so fast forward January of 2015, my cousin was working like seasonal help for the water department here, and a coworker overheard him talking that his cousin needed a transplant. And this gentleman decided to get tested, and I did not know him, and he actually lived like 20 minutes from me. So about a month later, I received a phone call from him saying, hey, my name is so-and-so, and I'm going to be your donor. I'm a match.
Get out.
Yes.
Look, I had to know a little bit of Heather's story. It gets more, I want to say bizarre. It's the only word that comes to mind. It gets more bizarre from here. So you get a phone call, I'm going to be your donor. And a living donor means, and I'm not a doctor, but they take a portion of their liver and they find a way to attach it to yours.
Correct. Yes. I didn't even know that the liver, that was possible to regenerate. So they actually took my entire liver out, and I received 55% of my donors. So within 3 months, the portion that I received grew to full size, and the rest of his liver grew back to full size as well. So that's what happens with living donation.
That's great. And you think, okay, This is where the Hallmark Channel comes in, and life is great. You're going to get clean bill of health, looks good for you. You're going to do okay. He's going to do okay as well.
So, yes, we started dating shortly after the transplant.
Figure. Oh, look, I give you part of my liver. Least you could do is go to dinner with me.
Right. So, yes, I received my transplant a week to the day before my 26th birthday. And then we started dating. We end up, and at that point, the local news stations and newspapers all picked up on it, like stranger donates to local girl and, now they're dating. Then the next thing was, oh, now they're engaged. And the story really blew up from there. So we ended up getting married. It was end of October 2016. I think it was the summer after that, Hallmark calls us. And I'm like looking at my phone, the caller ID, like, is this a joke? Hallmark.
What's your caller ID say? This is Hallmark Television calling?
I think it did say like Hallmark Channel, or I can't remember exactly, but I believe that did come up. So otherwise, I don't answer numbers. I don't know.
Heather, there's one thing I know about you. You and phone calls, I'm not going to question that at all, because you get the most bizarre phone calls I've ever heard of.
Oh, yeah, Steve Harvey, Ellen DeGeneres, Rachel Ray.
And here's the funny thing. I don't mean funny as in how funny. I say it all the time. When you meet Heather, you would never know. She has been interviewed. She's been on the Hallmark Channel's Home and Family, The Steve Harvey Show, To Tell the Truth with host Anthony Anderson, Fox and Friends, CBS On the Road with Steve Hartman, NBC Chicago News, Good Morning America, The Today Show, ABC News, BBC News, as well as online and magazines such as Reader's Digest, People, Cosmopolitan, Star, Self, and Women's Health. Is there anything I'm missing?
I did give you a long list. I didn't know how much to give you.
That's a huge list. Most people don't get any kind of that publicity. And before we go back to your story, did you ever think to yourself, why are these people talking to me? If I had a healthy liver, you wouldn't care at all.
Yeah, and I almost, to be honest with you, I almost felt guilty with all of these interviews. In the way that I got over that was like it was my way of educating about living donation, because this was 9 years ago, so it wasn't, you didn't hear about it as, but at times I really did feel guilty, because I'm like, gosh, there's people every day that are having transplants. And, just because I married my donor, I'm not any more special than the next person who has gone through this traumatic, life-changing.
I got to tell you, you marrying your donor is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
I know you're laughing about it. And here, because remember this, earlier in the conversation, I told you I had a conversation with Heather, and she said her life went from a Hallmark TV movie to Lifetime, which is important. We'll talk about that in a few moments without going into morbid details. He said, she said. There's no happy, white picket fence, 2.5 kids, and the dog in the yard in your story, is there?
No, definitely not.
And most of us don't get that. That's the thing, is like, no. I love Hallmark, but all these shows are like, oh, and they all lived happily ever after. They drank tea and they laughed and laughed and laughed. And I'm thinking, that's not how my life has been.
No, that's not real life. I'm sorry.
And it wasn't real life for you.
No. But I'm alive. So.
Well, the amazing part is you're alive, and all this happened before she turned 30. I'm going to give you a recap before we go to break. She was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver, even though she's not a big drinker. She was given a death sentence. If you don't find a way to get a living donor, you've got like 2 months left to live. She got a living donor, wound up being a coworker of her cousin. Overheard him talking, or her cousin talking about in need of a liver. All the social media stuff. They met. They started dating. They fell in love. Hallmark Channel called, which we're going to return to our conversation with Heather Kruger in a few moments, because trust me, there's a lot more to the story than you think. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. I believe in having a substantial percentage of my financial future secured with gold and silver. Contact Paul and his staff at Colonial Metals Group to learn how to protect your financial future at Colonial Metals Group. You can set up a safe and secure self-directed IRA where you can access your funds, your assets, no matter what. Call 800-898-1841, 800-898-1841. That's 800-898-1841, or go online at colonialmetalsgroup.com/LET Radio.
I start my day a couple of times a week with the Breakfast with Champions rooms, which are free, and on the Clubhouse app, which is also free. I get motivation, guidance, and inspiration for my personal and professional life. Plus, I get to interact and even ask questions from celebrities, all in the Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse app. The app and Breakfast with Champions is free. Download the app today, and I will see you in the Breakfast with Champions rooms on the Clubhouse app.
Return our conversation with Heather Kruger on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. I got to tell you this. Heather is the niece of Brian Swift, who was on the show February of 2022. You can listen to the podcast version of it. Brian was paralyzed in a freak football accident when he was a teenager. Phenomenal story, really inspiring. And then all of a sudden, she winds up getting a diagnosis of cirrhosis of the liver, fatal liver disease. If you don't get a transplant, you're going to die on a phone call. Mm-hmm. If you don't get a transplant, you're going to die. That's what the doctor said in the phone call, which is, "Hello, how you doing?" It's kind of hard. Kind of hard not to laugh at that one.
I know.
She got a donor, a living donor, that was a coworker of her cousin's. Went through the whole spiel about getting tested, got the liver donation, doing well. Met the donor, fell in love, got married. Hallmark Channel called you. That's where we left for the break. Hallmark Channel called you on the phone.
Yes. And they basically said they heard about our story, and they wanted to make our story into a Hallmark Christmas movie. And so they wanted, the rights to our story. And we discussed it. We agreed to it. I said, but I want it as close to my story as possible. So if I agree to this, I want to be involved in approving, the writing and everything, the scripts. Because, like you said, we know how Hallmark makes it very cheery and happy ending. And
it always starts off horrible. Then all of a sudden, that person they can't stand winds up being the love of their life, and then they live all happily ever after. It's awesome.
Exactly. So I was like, okay, I will agree to this, but I got to have my hand in it too. So, so they created Once Upon a Christmas Miracle that came out in December of 2018 and flew us out to LA, had the red carpet premiere of it, and it was the highest rated and most viewed Hallmark Mysteries and Movies movie in network history. So that was, again, very surreal that, what was so traumatic, life-changing, talk about new norms. I used to hate that word.
Yeah.
Just how, even though my life story didn't stay that fairy tale, it got so many people reached out to me, whether they were suffering with liver disease, they knew somebody, or just in general having a tough time in their life. I don't even know how many messages that because of your story, because of, your personality and you're always smiling, you gave me that hope to continue on, to not give up. And they thought I was healing them, but probably unbeknownst to them, all of these messages, it was helping me heal, just as much from hearing those things from them, because I never really got into why did this happen to me, or poor me. My mind really didn't go there.
That's something you and your uncle have in common, because he never ever mentioned that. I'm like, and
yes.
I can't help sometimes. Look, I went to a funeral this past Saturday, and I pulled something in my leg standing up from the pew, and I'm thinking, man, I can't take a step without hurting myself. Why me? And you don't think that. You get a, by the way, you're going to die kind of phone call, and you don't get the poor me's.
No, it almost pushed me the other way. Like growing up, I was the kid or teenager that if like you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to say why or question it, or I'm going to push to do it. So again, that whole God or my faith preparing me for what was to come, the doctor telling me that and giving me the stats, and then even after the transplant, oh, you're not going to be able to do this, you're not going to be able to do this. That drove me to like, okay, watch me, So that's where I put my energy into spilt milk. That, it happened, and I may never know why, but I can't change that. So let's keep moving forward and see how I could use what did happen to me to inspire others and educate others, about liver disease, and just that fight in them to not give up no matter what the odds are against you.
So you use part of your story as motivation to continue doing what you do to help others in need. Yes,
I do.
Do you ever find yourself at night, because I've gotten pretty good now clearing my mind, but there was a time where when things got quiet, that's when my mind would replay a lot of stuff. And
oh yeah.
I always say this: Sunday afternoons are the worst. They used to be horrible for me. They're still not that good. There's sometimes they're really not that good, because when inevitably I'm tired, I don't have anything to look forward to that day, and I start thinking back to the horrible stuff from the past. You got a pretty heavy duty thing going on here. You've been through some stuff.
No, absolutely, and I'm not going to say it's been an easy road at all. I always say I would have never, if you would have told me pre-transplant that it would have taken me this many years to get to where I am now, mentally, emotionally, coping with things, I would have never believed it. Like you said, oh, you got the transplant, you didn't have rejection, all these great things happen, like we're moving forward. But it's all great when you're interviewing and you're go. But like you said, when you sit at home at night or a Sunday afternoon and you're by yourself in your own thoughts and it's quiet, it's a totally different story.
Yeah.
And it has taken me a long time to, you go through almost like a grieving process of what your old life was and what you thought your current life was going to be like. So it's like, I've gone through like, okay, the depression, the anger, I think some acceptance, and then you think you're going along and something triggers something, and then you're like, nope, I'm still,
Yeah.
So,
by the way, you have a right to be. And I hate when people say it. Oh, you have every right in the world to be angry. Oh, I get really ticked off when people tell me that. Yeah, thanks for giving me permission to be angry.
Right. Oh, thank you, Captain Obvious.
Yes, I know.
So, yes, it has taken a long time for me to get to where I am. But, again, I've just gone back to, even, like I said, with the stories on your show, I'm like, gosh, I have nothing to complain about. I was never shot. I didn't lose a limb. I was listening to the gentleman yesterday who was shot in the eye, and he needed the 2 kidney transplants.
Oh, yeah.
So.
And by the way, that story was a now retired sheriff sergeant, and the recipient of the liver he got, or was it kidneys or liver? I can't remember.
Kidney, yeah.
Kidney was for another deputy who died in a car accident. I mean, what are the odds that happened? That saved his life. This young man. Yeah. And by the way, I'd ask this question. At 24, I was a totally different guy than I was at 30. My mindset was totally, but at 24, I couldn't even imagine being 60. Right.
Yeah. It's hard to conceptualize all that. And like you said, that other officer that saved his life, that like had me in tears listening to it, because he even had a conversation prior, like, hey, if I'm a match, like I want to be your donor. And then all that ended up happening. Like just amazing how that all panned out.
I see these stories on television, and I got to be honest with you, the older I get, I think the more tearful I become. And by the way, Hallmark Channel is one of the worst. I bawl like crazy watching those things. The commercials are horrible. Everything's horrible. I cry like crazy. So I changed the channel. But we'll see news reports where, someone got a heart transplant or someone got some other organ transplant, and they meet the recipient. And the reason why they're alive is the death of their loved one. And it just touches me. We're talking with Heather Kruger, a really interesting story. I'm so glad she's telling it. She was diagnosed with fatal liver disease, told she had a couple months to live. She can get a donor, got a donor, a living donor. They met, they fell in love, they got married. It was made into a Hallmark movie, one of the most viewed movies ever in Hallmark history. And then things got different. When we return to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we'll talk about that and much more. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. One of the questions I get all the time is, how can I show my support for law enforcement? We're all busy. We've got busy lives, but there's something oh so simple you can do with our Facebook page. Search for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. And when you see a post you agree with that resonates with you, share it, especially episodes of the podcast. To do all that, just search for us on Facebook, look for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to click like. Return to conversation with Heather Kruger on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. She is the niece of Brian Swift, who was paralyzed in a freak football accident when he was a teenager. He's on past episode of the show. You can listen to the podcast, go to letradio.com, and it's February of 2022. Phenomenal story. There's a lot going on in your family, Heather, that there's some real, what's the word? Upper Midwest, I'll show you kind of mentality that you don't see to let stuff down. And by the way, listen to you talk with a Chicago accent. All I can think is Blues Brothers. It's the only thing that comes on mind.
Do I really have that strong of an accent?
You got a pretty heavy accent there, I'm telling
really?
you. But it's,
well, that's awesome. Blues Brothers.
It's more the attitude than anything. So I'll just recap. Heather, at 24, was diagnosed with liver disease. By the time she was 25, they said, you got a couple months to live if we don't get a living donor. She got a donor, which was a miracle in itself. Met the donor. They fell in love. They got married. Hallmark called and said, hey, by the way, we want to make a movie about your story. She got involved with that. You got married. You're doing well. You survived what's insurvivable for lots of people. And then things took a turn for the worse, didn't they?
Yes, unfortunately. About a year after my transplant, a year and a half, we, like you said, we got married. I went back to school full time to become a occupational therapy assistant, and was working at a car dealership. And yes, I thought it was, match made in heaven, a fairy tale. Oh, after this crazy nightmare, I found someone, that's going to be my partner, make my life easier. And not so much. So, unfortunately, about three and a half years after we got married, we went our own ways. We divorced. So that's where I always say, if you can't make fun of yourself or laugh at yourself or stuff, like, you're going to be crying all the time.
You are.
And
especially your story. Oh, look, you got a lot to cry about. There's a lot of good stuff, a lot to celebrate, but there's a lot. It wasn't easy getting to where you're at. And, by the way, divorce was the hardest thing I've ever been through. I've been happily married for almost 25 years. My wife, Stephanie, the boss, and I have a great relationship. But getting over that divorce was horrifying. And rebuilding my life afterwards was one of the most difficult things I ever had to do. That was in my late 30s, early 40s, and it's like, now what do you do? What do you do? And here you are. You've already been through a lot. Now what do you do?
Yes, yeah, no, I can totally relate to that, because I moved back home. I asked for the divorce. I moved back home with my parents, so that in itself is a process. And
it's never easy for them or us being in your 30s moving back home.
No.
Trust me, I know all about it.
Yeah, so that was an adjustment. But, like you said, okay, it was like starting from ground zero again. And it did really set me back again, mentally, emotionally, physically, because it was affecting my physical health also. Even though I was the one who wanted the divorce and everything, it almost brought back almost like a PTSD of that same feeling of after the transplant, where when I remember exactly, I was being discharged from the ICU, and the nurse, a very simple question, so what's the first thing you want to do when you get home? And that hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, good question. I have no clue, because I don't even know who I am anymore. Like, what in the world just happened? You're trying to process everything. I lost friends that I thought were good friends during that process. So when I moved back home with the divorce, it really triggered those same types of feelings of, okay, I have to almost reinvent myself once again, and where do I start? And that's where I floundered for a couple years, because I think COVID too, being stuck in the house, it was like way too much time in my own head.
Oh, that's a bad neighborhood. Trust me, I don't want to go there by myself.
Right, exactly. And it was a lot of alone time and isolation, unfortunately. And I kept asking myself, okay, God saved me for a reason. I was given this second chance. I'm supposed to be happy. And yes, it's a miracle. And I am very grateful, because I think of the people who don't get a transplant in time. But how come I'm struggling so much, like, to figure out, why am I here? What is my purpose?
I'm glad you said that. What is my purpose in life from here on out? What do I do?
Right. So, I went through some depression, some just like going online and Googling, on their different job sites and everything. Nope, not me, not qualified, don't have that degree. And just kept getting more and more hopeless, really, for the first time in my life. I never felt that down, even, like I said, when I got that call from the doctor, I laughed. And through that whole process, I came out of that, and I decided to switch careers. And, my personality.
Wait a second. You've been through fatal liver disease. You get a liver transplant. You meet the donor. You fall in love. You get married. Hallmark Channel comes. You've been on every show known to man talking about your story. And then you divorce, and you're thinking, oh, I'm not qualified for this. Did you say, I went back to college, got a new degree? What did you do?
No, so I went back to college after my transplant. During that time when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, I actually lost my job in 2020.
Oh.
I was working as an occupational therapy assistant. I was the newest hire, and they let me go. So yes, on top of being isolated with COVID, it was not working. So that was when I decided, you know what, I enjoy the healthcare field, but it wasn't fulfilling enough for me. And I decided to not reapply for, a OT job. And that's when I started searching for, kind of almost like soul searching as well, to accepting more of my story. And instead of realizing that I was not accepting my current reality, that, I feel like is probably even more so as women, when you're growing up, you think like, okay, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have 2 kids by this age. And you know what I mean? You have a picture of what your life's going to look like. And every single aspect of my life did not go as planned. And I came to realize, okay, you're so miserable, Heather, because you are not accepting your reality. This is what it is. And you can either continue on being miserable and denying the past, or you have to figure out some way to embrace it and make that your purpose. You know what I mean? I realized that my purpose wasn't in the Google search that I was trying to find where I was qualified. My purpose was already in me, and I had to figure out how to bring it out to help other people.
Might I say you have a rather inspiring story?
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank
we
you.
really think about it, and not too many people have been through what you've been through. And I know you didn't do this by yourself. I know that you have family, you have other people that help, but part of that had to become motivation for what you do today. You've been a keynote speaker at hospitals and colleges, sharing your story, educating, promoting a proactive approach to wellness by seeking preventative measures and natural alternatives. I never would have pegged you for one of those natural alternative health kind of people. And I'm air quoting.
You what? I'm sorry.
I'm air quoting that, what you need is a bunch of raw oats. Okay, all right. My world's falling apart. I'm going to eat oats.
Yeah, to be honest, I would have never thought of that at myself, because in the past when someone was like, oh, why don't you go to this holistic person or that? I'm like, oh, what are they going to do for me? I blew it off. And what kind of has brought me to that point in my life is prior to my diagnosis from the university, I actually went to a functional medicine doctor, so more of like an alternative medicine doctor, because I knew something was wrong, and I was getting, from my primary care doctor and some specialists, like I was getting the lab work done, the tests, but everyone kept telling me everything was fine. Well, you know your body best, and you know when something is not right.
And yours was certainly not right. Heather, we are out of time. I got to have you back on the show. There's so much more we could talk about. If you want to get more information about Heather, the best thing to do is do a Google search and just search for Heather, common spelling, Kruger, Krueger. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Thanks so much for telling your story. Very much appreciated.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate you.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.